I think that a lot of CROs and CMOs are set up to fail. I think a lot of their jobs aren't clear. I think a lot of pressure is put on them. I think a lot of corporations don't give them the budget and the time and the runway to do their work. I don't think that their work is valued when they're in a research and audit stage, because I think there's a lot of pressure to perform. We need leads. I got to see revenue. And they're not given the time to be strategic and to do the work. And so there's a very short tenure, right? I think one role's tenure is 18 months and the average on the other is 19 months. And also, there's competition between the two. And sometimes they don't know how to partner. And there's finger pointing and there isn't alignment. And it's just not clear.
You are listening to Power Marketing with Kevin Lee. Kevin and his agency Did It have helped thousands of businesses win through superior marketing, as have his books, articles, speaking engagements, and the eMarketing Association Power Marketing podcasts. Here's Kevin.
Today I'm here with Mary Grothe, who started a company called House of Revenue, and we'll want to hear about that origin story, because there are a lot of other fractional marketing expert platforms out there. So I'm curious what the catalyst was for you deciding to start House of Revenue and focus on CROs as the fractional executive that you're delivering.
Thank you so much for having me. I have so much to share on this topic. When I started the company 5 years ago, we were operating under a different name. Our name was Sales BQ. BQ is the behavioral quotient. Originally, when I started the company, I had just come off of my second stint as a top sales performer for a Fortune 1000 payroll and HR company. And I wanted to build high-performing sales departments for small business owners. So that's how we started, with a sales focus. For 18 months, we acted as fractional VPs of sales, and we built tremendous sales departments for a lot of small companies where the CEO and owner were doing the sales themselves. And 18 months in, we finally had a feedback loop. We were able to look at the results, and we did see a difference in performance, and we were able to tie it to the companies who performed better had a good brand and marketing engine, but we weren't touching branding or marketing at that time. And so it was an internal team member who said, I think if we start helping some of those clients that don't have business cards or sales collateral, they have a very plain website, it's very outdated. What if we just started to do a few things to level up their marketing and brand? Would it not then help sales? I said, that's a brilliant question. Let's try it. She lended her hand first. She was our internal marketing manager. She lended her hand. And I'm sure, as you can imagine, every effort she put forth resulted in something better. Meaning then we had the data we needed to say, we're going to add fractional CMOs to our offering. By the time 2020 rolled around, we started doing what we do now. And we rebranded as House of Revenue. And that's where we paired a fractional CRO and a fractional CMO together. And the two of them were able to go on contract. We served 9 companies that year. And we were able to refresh the go-to-market strategy, rebrand the company, build a new website, a marketing engine, a sales team, and customer success. And we became a HubSpot partner. So we started working in the technology stack. All of a sudden, we saw performance and results like we had never seen in our company's history. And that's when we realized it's actually the pairing of that CRO and CMO together to break down the walls and silos between departments. And we saw something powerful that year. And then we were so grateful. We got to extend that into 2021. We served 11 companies in 2021. And this year in 2022, we've served 12.
Great. Well, congrats on that growth. And clearly sales and marketing, the Venn diagrams overlap a lot, right? And the two are quite synergistic. And for folks who sort of know that they probably need either the help of a CRO or perhaps the duo of the CRO, CMO, because they may have a CMO, but they may not have a CRO, sort of, how do they determine what level of fractional they need? Because obviously there are all sorts of different fractions. There's, a half, a quarter, et cetera. At what point does that fractional individual make a difference, right? Because if the person can only afford 1/8 of a CRO, is that too small to move the needle, right? So what fraction are people buying?
Well, I've seen fractional be everything that you just said. I've not heard it described that way. So that was very mathematically accurate and beautiful. But what I have seen is those 1/8 of a CROs or CMOs, that they are more at a consultant or advisor level. There's truly not enough time in the week when you're at an eighth or a quarter to really do any work. You're truly just advising. And what we have found, so we serve a very clear market segment. We do not work with startups. We work with what we call second stage scale. So these are companies who made it through startup scale. They've achieved a few million in revenue, but they're a little bit plateaued. And what we're able to do is to bring in that power that gets them through the plateau and gets them through the next stage of scale. So that's typically where a business owner is evaluating, do they hire a full-time CRO or do they work with a fractional? In that scenario, I would never recommend an eighth or a quarter. That's not enough time to do the job right. We go with the halves. So we're 50-50. So our fractionals each only have 2 clients. And what's tremendous is that with the right hand, their CMO, and then we also have a brand director and some content writers and our web dev team and RevOps team. We have some additional resources that help fuel the first few months of the engagement. We're able to bring forth the power and the ammo to actually build the engine and test it. And once we start getting the data points to say this is successful, then we can optimize with headcount and we set them for scale. We're not meant to be long-term. We actually graduate them within a year. And so we build the revenue engines inside of their company. So typically when you're in startup phase, I think having an eighth or a quarter is helpful because they're really just advising. And at that stage in startup scale, you really don't have the budget or cash flow unless you have a CRO founder who's working on equity. So you may have a CEO, CRO founder, maybe a CTO. If you have a CRO there, they are not a traditional CRO. If they're a startup founder CRO, they're doing everything from high level strategy to doing the sales themselves, doing pitches for investors, doing pitches for customers. They are testing the limits with branding, marketing. They're doing the competitive analysis and benchmarking and trying to understand what it's going to take to get product market fit and have that be validated. There's so much that a startup CRO does. So if it's a founder CRO, then that's going to be a mostly like sweat equity position. But if it's a CEO that is taking some of the more day-to-day components, a fractional CRO at a quarter or an eighth could be a great advisor for them. If the CEO founder is planning to do those activities, but they need the expert guidance on how to do them well, then that's where a very, very fractional CRO would work well. It's easier on the budget and it's more of an advisory role. But when you get into second stage scale or later, we really feel like fractional fits well with our half fractionals, fits really well in the second stage scale because it's less than hiring a full-time CRO. And actually for less than a full cost of a CRO, you get a fractional CRO and CMO and brand director and a few other people. So it's great because you're getting more of that revenue engine building team for less than a cost of a CRO or maybe around that cost of a CRO. So there's power. However, once you get through that second stage scale and you reach the next stage, you really do need a full-time CRO. So this is interesting because this is where a fractional CRO, the quarter or the eighth, comes back in. Because once you get to the point where you have a full-time CRO in place who's doing the 40 plus hour a week job and is fully integrated, what happens is a lot of their day-to-day gets pulled into the weeds and into the work. And they are less able to sit outside of the business and looking, outside in and being able to be strategic. So this is where when they get over the hump of that second stage scale and you have a full-time CRO in place, you would benefit again from having that quarter or eighth fractional because they can be an advisor to the CRO. So a fractional CRO advisor to the full-time CRO and helping them round them out and having that safe place for venting, benchmarking, baselining, whiteboarding, idea sharing, you get the point. So that's where that smaller fractional could potentially come back into play.
Right. Well, I love the idea that you have the vision ahead of time to sort of graduate, the company to the point where they have the full-time CRO and the full-time CMO. But obviously, in the cases where they haven't yet found that perfect person, have you already had situations where that they had to sort of kick that can down the road another 6 months or another year because in that interim period where you had the fractional team in there, they weren't able to find that perfect person yet?
Well, we help them solve that problem. So no, we haven't had the outcome because we solved the problem 2 ways. One, our clients can actually hire our CROs and CMOs if they feel like they had a great fit, and that's a mutual fit. So the CRO or CMO and the client just feel like it's a wonderful mutual fit and they want to consider full-time employment. We do have a placement fee for them and a 90-day transition. So they are welcome to hire our people if they pay the placement fee and work through a 90-day transition so they can offboard their other engagement. With that, we've placed 8 people in 3 years. In fact, one of our best success stories from 2020 was placing our CRO with a client full time. And she's gone on to scale that company to unbelievable levels. And it's been such a blessing for her and her family and the comp plan she has and everything else with it. So it's more than we could ever give her here. And it's been an unbelievable trajectory for her. On that note, if we decide that there isn't a mutual fit, if they don't want to hire the CRO, CMO, or our team member does not want to work there, we have the last 3 months. That's our empower phase. And our empower phase is when we are able to work with our contract recruiters. We have 18 contract recruiters we work with. We've worked with them for 3 years. They are absolutely tremendous. We're going to know with 3 months still left together if we're not going to have a full-time person coming from our team, or they don't have someone internally that can move into that role. So we recruit. And we are able to find that person, bring them on board, and then we train them and we work with them side by side so that we are leaving them with a whole running engine with the right people in the right seats, and it works.
Great. Is there any sort of guideline from a size perspective that tends to be sort of a sweet spot for you? Because there may be different types of industries or different types of businesses may have a different point at which they need that role filled on a fractional basis. So if there's anybody listening and they're sort of trying to figure out, should I give Mary a call or Mary's team a call? What would be a good way for them to know?
We are very specific on who we work with. We ask for that minimum floor to be 3 million. I'm going to come back to that in a minute. 3 million in annual revenue. Our sweet spot seems to be starting revenue between 5 and 10. That's where the majority of our clients have been. And we typically don't take on companies that are greater than 20 million because really at that point, they just need a full-time CRO. And we've missed that window where we can be fractional and be powerful and move the needle. And typically at 20 million, you really need a full-time person. So we want to play in that 5 to 20 million. We do have a floor at 3. However, there's always an asterisk, right? Recently, we had a prospective client come knocking on the door and he said, we're all about 2.5 million, but we have $900,000 in cash sitting available to invest in the growth journey. He then walked me through on what he's done operationally to ensure that the company was set up to be able to scale, that he was able to handle the growth and be able to deliver on that flawlessly. So that was a very rare CEO to come in and say, I know we're under your threshold. However, we have capital to invest, which 900,000 is great. That's exactly where we need to be in order to look at doubling the size of his company. So anywho, there's always an exception to the rule, but we want to have those conversations. It's when we get that $1.5 million company, they're like, we want to double. And then we talk about investments and headcount and growing on the tech stack and other roles. And they're like, I don't have $750,000. I'm like, well, if you want to double revenue, did you think that was free? You have to invest in order to grow. I mean, if we're looking at $750,000 total budget with increasing headcount, investing in technology, creating a marketing budget, employing our fractionals and brand director, if that's what we determine, and it's different for every client, but let's say that's what we determine. If you're going to invest 750, but you're going to get 1.5 million out of it in 12 months. But then after that, the reduction of the amount you need to invest year over year goes down, but now you're sitting at that higher run rate. And so you start paying that investment back and then you can continue to scale. And that's the difference between growth and scale. Growth is where your expenses are going month over month at the same rate as your revenue. So you're really not increasing profits. And that you see that model very commonly when people who grow their revenue by adding headcount and sales. For every salesperson we will add $400,000 a year. And then they look at the stair-step growth. But true scale is we make an investment up front to put in the systems and processes, the right people, the right technology, the right go-to-market strategy. We do the right brand refresh. We build the right engine. And then what happens is we invest in that up front. But then once we test it and we confirm that it's viable, we will optimize it, add the headcount, add the budget. And then if we're able through the optimization to get the same or score better numbers from the initial test. Then we set it for scale. And then at that point, you've already invested and you have the infrastructure, you have the engine. So the hope is that you can simply scale the engine and you're doing that independently of having to make that investment anymore. And that's what unlocks profits. It gives you that payback period on the initial investment, and we're setting the company for scale. So there's just quite a difference between the two. But that's why we have that $3 million floor, is because most companies don't truly understand what it takes to scale. It's our team's responsibility to show them. We actually start with a 40-day process. We don't even start with an annual contract. That comes later. We start with a 40-day process where we audit and research and do the competitive analysis and benchmark their product or service to figure out if it's even viable in the market anymore. Does the buyer want it at that price point? What's changed in the competitive landscape? What is your brand promise? Where do you differentiate? Who could strategic partners be? What are the other paths and methods to revenue that you don't currently have in place? We rebuild the go-to-market. We benchmark all of their people. Do you have the right people in the right seats? Do you even have the right roles? We build a new org chart, show what should be today, what it should be as through the growth, and then provide them with the 12, 24, and 36-month revenue economics model to show them what the growth is going to cost, where the investment's going to go, and when they're going to start seeing some return. If they say yes to that, then we will go into a 12-month contract. So we've tried to be as transparent as possible. There are no surprises when you work with us. But if you truly want to scale, we have to just break down some of those belief systems or myths about what that actually means and make sure that we are working with CEOs that are serious about it. And if we're not the right fit, there are a lot of firms and fractionals that'll help companies grow. We're here to scale. And that's a very different process.
Right. Thanks for the clarification on that. One fascinating thing I've noticed in the last 10 years in particular with regards to, often with companies already doing 30, 40, 50, 100 million in revenue, is that for the CRO title, right, the responsibilities are sometimes different, right? Some CROs are really just only in charge of sales, right? Some CROs, because of the word revenue, right, are equally involved in everything CRM-ish, right? Which would be increasing lifetime customer value, increasing AOV, upsells and cross-sells, and understanding those dynamics. When you guys engage, do you use a sort of fairly tight definition of what is the CRO's responsibility versus what is the CMO's responsibility and where they overlap? Or are you flexing that based on the particular company?
Okay, one, I love your questions. Two, I love your words. CRM-ish. That's great. I might use that.
Well, it comes in a lot of flavors, right? CRMs, not all CRMs are the same.
That's so funny. I love it. We are very tight on our definition. In fact, if you follow me on LinkedIn or read my articles or listen to my podcast or just watch the comments that I leave on other people's posts, you will find out very quickly that I'm passionate about the real definition of a CRO. A CRO is not a glorified sales leader. And that is how the title has been used in many companies. And I do not agree with that. And that's okay if you disagree with me, because I am so passionate, because I've been a fractional CRO. I am a CRO right now for a company out of the DC area. And I am so passionate about the definition we believe in, because I have firsthand seen the rapid success that can take place, success measured in multiple different ways that I'll share here in a moment. When you have that true holistic definition of a CRO, if you want to have a sales leader, that's fine. Make them a CSO, a chief sales officer, but they're not a chief revenue officer. Exactly. Give them a C-level title, that's fine, but call them what they are. A chief revenue officer means revenue, and revenue comes from more than just sales. So when you look at the entire life cycle of a customer, you have all of your attraction methods through brand awareness and ultra top of funnel into top of funnel, middle, bottom. So you have your sales and marketing funnel. Then you have a purchase point. Well, guess what? It's not where revenue stops. In fact, that's actually where revenue begins. So we're clear. And then it goes into onboarding customers, making sure that they're adopted, retaining them, expanding the revenue, and turning them into advocates. Marketing plays a part in that, from very ultra top of funnel and brand awareness. And then it goes into the marketing funnel where it becomes much more tactical. and aligns with the stage that they're in their buyer's journey. And then once they come on board, marketing can do fantastic things to assist in the customer journey through customer education materials, videos, onboarding, and helping them understand building knowledge bases and reducing some of that stress and headcount on CS and implementation. Marketing then can retain the customer through education, thought leadership, webinars, ways to get them interacted, events, inviting clients to participate in philanthropic events or giving, whether it's online, it's in person. There's ways to engage your customers that marketing can do that. They can educate them on ancillary products and services, which helps with the expansion step. But then you go into advocacy, which is really marketing's role. Because if you think about the full flywheel, that's where it comes back into the top. Because if you can generate what we call CSQLs, customer success qualified leads, through customer advocacy, boom, you are filling the top of funnel, and it's brilliant. And that's how a lot of really wonderful companies perform, and they keep their client acquisition costs down. So a CRO is a chief revenue officer. They should absolutely be in charge of everything with go-to-market strategy. They should also understand brand strategy, marketing, sales, customer success, and revenue operations. And that's one of the bigger pieces. What's a CRO to do if all they have is this big strategic vision, but they can't take that information and disseminate and to turn it into a tactical execution plan? And I know that that's where our CROs are so different and why it's so hard to recruit them, because we have a very small talent pool from which we can recruit, because there are few CROs that have risen up the ranks with no bias, equal parts sales and marketing, and worked in customer success, and they're technical and they're data driven and they make data informed decisions and they love technology. Our CROs, myself included, I mean, I'm working on a project right now, and they brought me in and said, hey, our VP of sales turned, we have a sales problem. I said, I'm going to bet you $1 million you have a lot more than a sales problem, but okay, I'll play. So I showed up for the first day and a half on site and did my pre-discovery meetings one-on-one with people before then, and showed up for a day and a half on site. And my follow through report to executive leadership was, you have maybe like 1/10 of a sales problem, if that. 90% of the problem. And I broke it apart on every other category of revenue, from ultra top of funnel brand strategy all the way through the sales and marketing funnel, through the onboarding step, which needed a lot of attention and improvement, through retention, expansion, and advocacy. And when they saw this full report, they're like, oh my gosh, had we hired a VP of sales, we would have still had the exact same problem a year from now. I said 100%. And then you would have never scaled to the revenue that you want to. I mean, they're looking at doubling in size, more than doubling in size in 5 years. And they're just under 20 million. So I'm looking at this. I'm like, there's no way you could do that if you had a VP of sales. That's not your problem. And so it has been such a joy and such a blessing to be a part of that team, with a leadership team that truly understands the value of a CRO, and the project plan and everything that's come forth is hitting all of revenue. That's the CRO that you want, not a glorified head of sales. Just go hire a VP of sales.
Absolutely. You make a great point there, which leads me to a follow-up question, which is that, that holistic view of the CRO also requires sort of a holistic view from the CMO's perspective, right? Because the two of them are working in tandem on so many areas in that Venn diagram and roles and responsibilities. So you sort of need both of those people to be on board, right? In order to get that holistic, balance. When you're only putting in one of those two people, is there an educational process that you go through with the counterpart to make sure that the definition of those roles is appropriate?
I have to just continue to be fiery and passionate and tell you how I really feel about this topic. When I was a salesperson, I didn't have the support of marketing. I was what many have referred to as a sales unicorn. Many people that rose up the sales ranks that started in late 90s, early 2000s did a lot of things manually. Marketing was very underdeveloped. So being a top sales performer, I did my own marketing. I wrote every single email. I created my own slicks and flyers, which I'm sure if I look back at them, they were really beautiful, but it worked. I did my own direct mail. I did my own events. I did everything on my own, and I was very successful. And so for me, I actually had tunnel vision about a CMO. I actually didn't find any value in them. And I was a little bit, unfortunately had a pretty bad ego and some arrogance around it when I first started the company. I truly thought that the power of revenue was in the salesperson's hands. So I really do have some grace for people who think a CRO is a glorified sales leader, because I would also agree with you that back in 2017 and 2018, when I started this company, I had a similar viewpoint. It was not until we brought on our first fractional CMO and I watched them pair with a VP of sales, and my mind was blown. I had no idea to that point how marketing had evolved. I thought she was speaking a different language. Her name is Rachel, and she's amazing. One of the most accomplished CMOs I've ever met in my life. She schooled me in everything I knew about generating revenue. And for the first time in years, I felt like a humbled student. And I sat there and I felt like I learned a new language. And then I got my inbound marketing certification through HubSpot, which is like a 4 or 5 hour course, which was better than my 4-year marketing degree. And all of a sudden, I realized that I had undervalued or completely devalued the strength of executive marketing leadership. And she opened up my eyes to a whole new world. So hear me out on this, because this is a very interesting journey. So internally at House of Revenue, I'd always had like a marketing manager. And then I'm this more like elevated CEO, CRO point. And I've had great people working in our marketing department. And I was dictating a lot of the strategy. It was very check the box marketing. I was never really challenged on the ideas or strategy. Really, everything was coming from me. And then one day, about 1.5 years ago, so we have this model. This is the best part of the story, is we have this model at House of Revenue for our clients. We're pairing a CRO and a CMO, and it's brilliant. But yet me internally, I have this thought like, I can do all this. Well, 1.5 years ago, we had turnover in that seat, the marketing manager position. And we brought on one of the most talented marketers I've ever met in my life. And she started in a very like quiet and humble manner, like the secret killer. So she earns her stripes and she just starts elevating things slowly and slowly, revamping, elevating, and like floating new ideas in, I think, to test the waters to see what I was going to be like to work with. And originally when she came on board, she actually didn't report to me. So it was kind of like, through the chain. But then as of January of this year, we just started working so much closer together instead of about 11 months ago. And all of a sudden, she starts exuding those qualities of a CMO. She's challenging our strategy in a beautiful way. She's doing all the research and competitive analysis. She completely reworked all of our charts and data and metrics and KPIs and how we were going to hold ourselves accountable for performance in our own brand and revenue funnel. And all of a sudden, my world started changing in that CRO seat of, so this is what it's like to have a right hand. This is what it's like to have somebody equally as brilliant in revenue, but with the specialty on brand and marketing. And my life changed. I've never had a partner like this in my entire life or business that could go head to head with me, respectfully challenge. She's so data driven and data informed. And something shifted inside of me to say, why have I not been advocating for the CRO CMO relationship? We were literally doing it for a living, but I didn't have the belief system myself because I hadn't yet experienced it. And so I share that with you because I think that a lot of CROs and CMOs are set up to fail. I think a lot of their jobs aren't clear. I think a lot of pressure is put on them. I think a lot of corporations don't give them the budget and the time and the runway to do their work. I don't think that their work is valued when they're in a research and audit stage because I think there's a lot of pressure to perform. We need leads. I got to see revenue. And they're not given the time to be strategic and to do the work. And so there's a very short tenure, right? I think one role's tenure is 18 months and the average on the other is 19 months. And also, there's competition between the two. And sometimes they don't know how to partner. And there's finger pointing and there isn't alignment. And it's just not clear. So I firsthand have been able to live the partnership of a CRO and CMO. And now I'll shout it from the rooftops about how to create that and how to have harmony with that person and honor in just the fact that you are aligned to one goal. But the two of you can challenge each other very respectfully just to make sure we're putting forth the absolute best plan and strategy.
It's interesting. There's a book by I think it's the former CEO of Dunkin' Donuts called The Challenge Culture, which is interesting because it talks about how one needs to have that openness to be able to have a frank discussion within the executive ranks and even down further. So it's a great book, but and I think a lot of folks sort of need to have that epiphany to be able to put that ability for peers to have different opinions and sort of work through and use the best and the brightest of each of their minds to come to an agreement on things. So I'm curious because most organizations don't have that. And you mentioned the fact that sometimes because of the Venn diagram overlap, the CRO and CMO may actually end up butting heads, right, in a non-respectful way. When that happens, who has to reconcile that? Is that then the CEO's role to sort of figure out how to smooth that over and get those folks aligned and have them realize that the rising tide floats both boats higher?
Okay, so this is currently up for discussion between my CMO and myself because I do have to say something that I think the reason why I welcome her challenges is she's so kind and respectful and data informed when she challenges. It doesn't feel egotistical. It doesn't feel like it's coming from a place of proving herself or that she has to be right or she's claiming territory or it's none of that. I did some research. Here's what the data is saying. Like, I think we need to be aware of this. Hey, this came across my desk. I saw this in my newsfeed. I was in conversation with someone, or I just have a feeling. And it's so warm and welcoming. And she's always got the data and the research. That way, opinions are valuable, but data is priceless. I think people can argue with opinions, especially if they feel that it's rooted in arrogance or personal agenda or a competitive nature. But when it's really rooted in something that's going to help move the needle and it's very genuine in accomplishing a goal, I don't know how people can disagree with that. So I think there is an art to challenging that makes it, I never feel challenged by her. I use the word challenge and other people may be triggered by that. Like, I do not want to be challenged on a daily basis. She empowers me through bringing forth new information that challenges my perception and thinking or the way we're doing things. It never feels personal. So I would love to read that book because I think that there is an art to presenting an opposing viewpoint or new data without it feeling like it's a personal attack or, someone's better than another person. Like, I don't have space for that in my life. That stuff drives me nuts. But maybe that's happening in someone's organization. So you ask the question, who's going to resolve this? So this is where my CMO and I are currently and maybe have opposing viewpoints is I have laid it out in our company and I've laid it out in my mind that at the end of the day, the CRO has veto and has power, that the two are equals in all things. But when it comes down to in this very moment, what strategy are we going to adopt and what are we going to do or what does the decision need to be? That I give the CRO that authority. They have that authority in my organization. It's the authority between my CMO and I right now that at the end of the day, I have the final decision. I have not seen that backfire. However, just because that's how it's set up here and works really well here does not mean that that's how it's going to be forever. It doesn't mean that that's how it should be in any other organization. And I think every company is different. The products and services that they sell are different. The market that they serve is different. The size of the company, the industry, everything is different. So if it doesn't make sense for the CMO to roll up to the CRO and they're more peers, then absolutely, I believe that the CEO should have that conversation and be able to evaluate if there truly is that conflict or inability to decide on how to move forward. I think it should default to the CEO. Sabrina, my CMO right now, she's in CMO school. I'm in CRO school through Pavilion. And it's a big topic of discussion of who does the CMO report to? And are they 50-50 partners with the CRO? And what does that look like? And what is the hierarchy? So I know that it is a pressing, like very valid and relevant and real conversation that people are having. And so she's got a lot of data on that. But then in my own way, I'm like, I really like how it is right now. So I might just be stubborn.
Well, that's a great perspective on it. That there may work differently in different organizations. One area where I've seen things work particularly well when there's a holistic synergy between sort of the marketing role and the CRO role whether it's a VP of marketing or a chief marketing officer, is that commonality of sort of revenue focus. Because what I often see happen is that sometimes they'll use proxy success KPIs, which don't actually reflect to true long-term revenue. So they leave out things like, lifetime customer value, or they leave out things like AOV, or they leave out other factors. And so sometimes, for example, sales will clamor like, I need more Glengarry leads, right? And they just think about Glengarry leads as the ones which are more likely to close, or likely to close at a higher commission level, right? But they're not necessarily thinking holistically because they're at the front lines. But of course, at the CRO level, because it's revenue that they're optimizing against, they need to be thinking holistically. And that information about what's the difference between an average customer and a great customer, if that doesn't make its way back into the marketing stack, marketing's also going to use proxy, cost per lead metrics, for example, right? When not all leads are created equal. And so it's only when they align around the true value of customers that's when it blows the doors off, right? Because then it's not just using the wrong proxy variable. So I'd love your thought on that.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm a data-driven leader. I have great opinions about things, but again, opinions are valuable and data is priceless. I think it's maddening to just run off of opinions, but they're valuable. But then it's even more maddening to run off of bad data, or the wrong data. And I agree with you that when people maybe 5-8 years ago decided we need to start measuring marketing, we immediately went to what is the trigger that we can measure that creates more revenue? And that's going to be leads. So people just flocked to it. Like, great, let's focus about everything about generating a lead. The cost for that lead, all the different things that we need to do in order to do that, the different types of leads that we have, and everything became around the MQLs. All of a sudden, department heads, leaders are getting compensated around MQLs, or if they weren't being bonused on them, they were being held accountable to them. And then it caused, we can drive a whole bunch of leads, but then sales, it's like, wait a second, a white paper download is not a lead, just so we're all clear. And then this huge argument started between marketing and sales because we told marketers your value is in driving leads. Oh, and by the way, you get to come up with the definition of what a lead is. It's like, this is a recipe for disaster. So what I have noticed is over the last couple of years, something that I'm very passionate about as a CRO is revenue attribution. And understanding that it could take 10 or 15 or more different touches and influences on a buyer in order to convert to a lead. And it is not one single thing. Now, there could be one thing that causes it to tip over. So they may have seen your brand or someone who works for your company in a news feed because someone else liked or shared something and it, pulled it to their news feeds. They may have some brand awareness there. They may take an action like following your page. Okay, great. They may comment on your post one day and maybe your brand responds and does a little social listening. Maybe they like your content, so they sign up for your newsletter. They sign up for your newsletter and they're enjoying some of the thought leadership. But in one of those newsletters, they get invited to a webinar. And that topic just really strikes them like, I got to do this. So before that webinar happens, they register, they get a call from a salesperson, like a BDR. And it goes to their voicemail and, they're trying to get a conversation. And they say, I'm not ready to have a conversation with you, brand. I'm just getting to know you. I like your content, but don't hound me. Like, I just want to attend this webinar and become educated. So they disregard those calls, but that BDR keeps up, now they're screening calls, not answering it, but it keeps this awareness keeps coming to them and the brand keeps getting put in front of them. So they're thinking about it. So then they attend the webinar and lo and behold, that was a very good webinar. And now they're further down in their awareness process to where they're almost considering like, maybe I do have a problem that's worth solving. Maybe I should talk to these people. Now they go back into their deleted voicemails and they're like, maybe that BDR, maybe it's time to have a conversation. So they go to call that BDR and now they set the initial conversation. What was it that caught, what's the lead source on this? And that's very real, but using a tool, we're huge HubSpot fans. And so we use a tool inside of HubSpot that allows us to show and report on all of those touch points. So we can see the journey of that buyer before they ever became a lead. Now we're able to go to marketing and we can look at the trends and which of the 20 tactics that we've deployed over the last 6 months are creating enough motivation and excitement for that person to want to connect with this brand in a variety of ways. That's where we can start to say to marketing, hey, here's our North Star. Here's where we need to optimize. Here's where we're going to put more budget. This is what we're going to do more of. This is what we're going to do less of. And then over time, the quality of those leads becomes far more valuable because we finally have the data to show it.
So your team's super involved, either maybe sometimes just a fractional CRO. More commonly, it seems like you're trying to put the CMO CRO team in there, and you've obviously got your preferences to whether or not there's a reporting relationship there, but it might be true peers. But I'd love to hear more about that transition, right? When you're sort of like the Peace Corps, you don't disappear entirely, right? You train the people on how to fish and farm, but you're still there, right? So what does that transition look like if the person doesn't choose to hire your fractional to be a full-timer and they've rather found with your help somebody to take on the role? How do you wean them, but yet continue to provide the value on a go-forward basis?
Okay, so let me tell you, I'm very open-minded to a CRO only engagement. However, that's my opinion, but the data is priceless. The engagement that I spoke about earlier today, where I've stepped in as a fractional CRO for a $17 million company, I've tried to do this by myself for the last 4 weeks. I told you about what happened when I did the on-site and they thought they had a sales problem. We came back. I'm like, that's 10% of your problem. Here's 90% of what's going on. I'm very dangerous when it comes to marketing. I know a lot and I know their industry very well. So I felt well positioned to go it alone and tackle this. And then I finally woke up the other day and said, who am I kidding? I can't do a CMO's job. In this, whereas I can direct the high level strategy, I don't have the bandwidth or capacity to be able to perform as powerfully in that seat as an actual CMO. And so I went tapping on my CMO's door. I'm like, hey, you want to scale a company with me? To which she said, I would love to. And I went to the client and I said, theoretically, like I could do this, but it's going to delay us achieving these goals. And if you allow me to bring in my CMO, I have a feeling, and I ran through the list, all of this can be accomplished by the end of January. Is that worth investing an additional $15,000 a month? To which the response was, do it. So I share this because sometimes companies think they know what they need, and I'm willing to listen to that argument and that pitch. I'm so grateful I've had the privilege of sitting in this seat for 5 years. We served 45 companies and built their sales departments in the first 18 months of this. The realization and the data was that every single company that didn't have a great brand and marketing engine and marketer team, when they didn't have it, the results were lower. 100% across the board, the companies who had someone in charge of marketing and had a great brand and marketing engine, 100% of the time outperformed the other companies. What more data do you need? So I get these prospective clients and these CEOs that are like, we got a sales problem, or we already have a CMO. That's my favorite. Like, we already have a CMO in place. I'm like, great, let's have that conversation. That CMO might be fine, but they haven't had a CRO directing, leading, and also just strategizing with them and getting into the weeds and ideating and exploring and challenging the status quo and doing research. They haven't had a partner in crime. So maybe they need to be taught, mentored, developed, and really grown into that role. So I listen to those when they come through to me. And then sometimes I'm naive enough to say, okay, we can start with just a CRO, but every time it's revealed, we've got to have the CRO CMO combo. Even if they have an internal CMO, our CMOs are battle tested in scaling companies, and they are battle tested and proficient in a high performing relationship with the CRO. So we would pair our CMO with their internal CMO to become best buddies learn from each other. And then that CMO gets it modeled for them on how to be a brilliant CMO and work in pure partnership with someone in the CRO seat. So we still would not separate the two. I just had to share that with you because I think it's important for people to know. Like, I get a lot of very smart and brilliant CEOs in our funnel, and they think they know what they need. And it's like, I'll love you and let you tell me what you think you need. But if you're like the patient that goes to the doctor and you Googled, and so you're like, this is what's wrong with me, and then you're not letting the doctor do their job. So let us do our job. We know the process. We know what creates a winning formula. And so we really are not interested in separating those out. So I'm going to back off here because I just got a little uber passionate and I completely forgot the second half of your question.
That's all right. So did I. But I do have a great follow-on question, though, which is, one common theme as it relates to you getting your companies aligned around this sort of dynamic duo, right, of the CMO, CRO, is the idea of opportunity cost and velocity, right? Meaning we might be able to get there if we do it this way, but we can get there faster if we put this holistic plan in place, right, with the dynamic duo, and trying to quantify that opportunity cost that, you could have velocity graph 1 or velocity graph 2. Let's look at the incremental cost versus incremental benefit of that and try to quantify the opportunity cost, because that's the only thing I've ever seen shake loose that kind of resistance, let's say, to perhaps investing a little bit more and so that you can really crush the market. And I'm wondering, sort of, when you've come across that resistance, what's been has your pitch been an opportunity cost pitch? Has it been a velocity pitch? Has it been an efficiency pitch? What's shaken loose the executives and saying, yeah, you're right, we really do need the dynamic duo?
Yes, and yes. When I was 23 years old. So at 22, I started with the payroll and HR company, and I was entry level, no experience, no college degree. And within a year in an admin role, I knew I wanted to be in sales. And so my manager had me on the fast track to learn. And I remember I was put in the hot seat. We had one of those fun little sales kickoff meetings, and they were doing this situational role playing, and you had a scenario. And also, the company had a great tuition reimbursement program. So I was in some business classes while earning my marketing degree. And one of the topics in my business class was about total cost of ownership, the TCO. So when you're looking at a business, you have the total cost of ownership. And inside of that were calculations for things like opportunity cost, velocity, efficiency, productivity. And in the moment, in the hot seat where we were divided into teams, and I'm 23 years old and I'm so green. I know very little at this point, but I was a good student, and we were sitting there, and I'm the admin who knows nothing, paired with very seasoned, talented sales reps that are completely questioning our manager of, why did you just pair us with our 23-year-old sales admin? They're competitive. They wanted to win. And they're like, this is not going to allow us to win. And so in that exercise, I remember sitting there with these very seasoned, talented professionals, looking them in the eye and trying to tell them that I felt the argument inside of this role playing, not the argument, but the positioning that we needed to have in the sales pitch, which is about TCO, because I had just learned about it. And I was helping them understand opportunity cost and velocity and efficiency and productivity, and how I felt it would help the conversation with the CEO and understanding why outsourcing, of course, it was for payroll and HR, made better sense than having internal people doing in-house payroll. And it was so difficult for me because I had no credibility and I had no trust from them on that. So they're looking at me and they're like, aren't you so cute? Like, you should just probably sit here and not say anything. And then we're going to go ahead and do the presentation. So I usually rise to the occasion in those situations. So I'm like, yeah, cool. So we're in the role play. And it's going south, as I'm sure you can imagine. So here I am sweating, like so nervous. And I decide to speak up and start using my TCO language. And I go through in this role play. I grew up in the performing arts, so I'm not afraid to be on stage. And I went through and I just ad-libbed this whole thing. And my sales manager in that moment, we ended up winning the competition. And my sales manager in that moment was so impressed with the 23-year-old's ability to articulate and understand what it means to dissect a business owner's decision, which may be a little bit emotionally driven or a little tunnel vision, and be able to help them understand the true cost of making that decision and what their options were based on the investment level. And I have never not carried that into nearly every sales conversation that I've had since that day at 23 years old. I had to tell you that story because I could have just said, yes, I use that in all of my sales conversations. Like that would have been a really lame answer. The truth of the matter is that is what a CEO cares about. They are fine. What did we just talk about? Being challenged. I told you how my CMO challenges me in a very non-threatening way. It's all data informed. And that's the exact same way that I challenge CEOs when they're coming through our funnel and they think they know what they need, is I'm able to lay it out for them and help them understand, well, you have some options. In fact, I just had a conversation yesterday with someone saying, I think we're right here on the tipping point of hiring someone full-time or working with your firm. Help me understand the difference. And I was happy to walk away from the deal and say, you know what, you're right. You're not a fit. But instead, I just laid it out for him and helped him calculate both options and what I thought the return would be, and really agreed with him that you're right in the middle. And I don't think you can go wrong with either, but we would need to have a very specific strategy if you decided to work with us because you're so close to the tipping point. So it wouldn't be a traditional engagement. Walking away from that conversation, he already was ready to commit to making a decision within a week, put the next meeting on the calendar. He was so grateful for the thoughtful conversation and was prepped and ready to go internally and then come back informed and make that choice. I couldn't agree with you more. Every person in that seat should be able to talk about TCO and the components of it.
One other philosophy that just came through in the way you sort of described your when you go into sales mode is this idea that you're really trying to get the customer to make the right decision, even if that decision isn't for you to make the sale, right? And by putting their needs first, that becomes that comes through, that shines through, right? That's transparent, particularly if you really articulate the numbers and you help them walk through the numbers, which will lead them to the right decision again, which might not be you. I think that just pays dividends. I've just seen over and over again that pay dividends within sales organizations, right? That if they're educated on why you have to do the right thing for the customer, it changes the sales dynamic dramatically. So kudos on that. That's not really a question, but that's more of a statement. Because I think there are too many sales teams that don't do that. So I'm sure that your CROs, when they go in and they take over and they build sales teams, they probably make that a fundamental, foundation of those sales teams as well, which is part of why they're successful.
Yes. And that's fine that was just a statement. I know you didn't put it into a question, but I will add on this topic that a full pipeline sets you free. That a lot of times, even as a business owner or as an individual sales contributor, when we get into manipulation or trying to massage a situation to put that square peg in the round hole and get it to fit, or we get into a moment of persuasion or convincing, that's that icky side of sales that on the inside, it's probably not the right fit, but then you're leveraging your super talents and persuasion to convince somebody that it's a good fit. And let me tell you how that ends up. When you're in a sales role, it's becomes someone else's problem. You get your commission check and you're like, man, I am so amazing. Look at my rankings. When you're the CEO and you allow that client to come on board, you then have to sleep in that bed that you made. And in moments of desperation, in our last 5 years, I have made that decision. And I have knowingly made it because I cared more about covering our overhead and working through those seasons where we've had, early graduations of a client and we needed to fill the spot, or our pipeline just was kind of mediocre. And we just didn't really have that one that we were so excited about. It was such a good fit. So I'm like, okay, maybe some red flags. Let's do our best. Do you know what the outcome was every time? It was hard. It was hard. And we worked harder than we needed to. And we knew from the beginning. But I am no different from a salesperson, from a CEO if I'm selling. And I share this really transparently because if you have CEOs listening to this, we've all been there. We've all brought on the client that later we're like, maybe we shouldn't have brought them on. And then when you go back in the conversation, it's like, did you pick up on any red flags when you were first meeting with them? And the answer is going to be yes. But you did it because the revenue was extremely helpful during that time. But then it ends up costing you later. So as I mature as a CEO and I realize the opportunity cost of bringing on clients that maybe aren't the right fit, I know I've learned and I'm maturing and I'm realizing that it's easier to take the hit for a month and fill the pipeline with the right prospects. But there's also just the whole concept of if you have a full pipeline at all times, then it's a non-issue and you never have to worry about that. And the sales manager told me that a full pipeline sets you free. Like it sure does.
Absolutely. So nobody knows what 2023 will bring. Obviously, there's rumors of a recession. But what has you excited about 2023, despite the fact that it may be a rough year for some businesses?
Yeah, that's a loaded question. And I realize we've already been talking for a long time and some of the listeners may be wanting this to wrap. So I won't give you the 20-minute answer, but 2022 was a very hard year for me. If anybody wants to know the details, you can go back and listen to any of my podcast episodes because I actually have a lot of joy of just transparently sharing the journey. I think that it's helpful for other entrepreneurs and CEOs or aspiring entrepreneurs to listen, to realize that entrepreneurship is very hard and scary and it's lonely and it's difficult, but it can be extremely rewarding. I think that there's a lot of glamour about being a CEO and there's glamour behind this title and like, look, Ma, I made it. And, there's power and authority and all the cool stuff. And there's a lot of magazines that want to feature you on their top 10 list for $2,500, FYI. That's an inside joke. If you know, you know. But on that note, it is a very hard job. And 2022, I felt like I got my teeth kicked in this year. I felt like I've been raked over the coals. I feel like I've made the most mistakes that I've made. I feel like I've made decisions reactively. I feel like I've made decisions under pressure and I haven't consulted outside counsel because of my pride. I feel like I've felt that if I'm going to have this title, then I should know how to solve these problems and I should know how to figure it out. And because I put that pressure on myself, I think I made this year harder on myself than it probably needed to be. I've spent a lot of time in the last couple of weeks in reflection as I am doing my planning for next year. And again, I share these things, which maybe aren't on your typical podcast and the hoorah and, everything's so glamorous and great. And it's not. This year was hard. I questioned myself a lot. And I'm looking at next year and how I want to be next year and how I'm going to show up for this company, for myself, my family, as a wife and a mom. And I realize that it starts with, at the core, just forgiving and loving myself and giving myself some grace and being okay with putting bright, brilliant, mature, experienced people in my corner. That I don't have to be the smartest person in the room, that I don't have to solve all these problems, that it's actually okay if I don't know how to solve a problem, which I'm not sure I've ever given myself that grace to be okay admitting that I don't know. I'm super stubborn and type A and I'm a survivalist. And you can hear more about that on my podcast just with my awful traumatic upbringing. But I think 2023 for me is a year to surround myself with like-minded people, to engage more in a community aspect than a hierarchical, I can't say that word, hierarchical setup to where I'm in charge and I have to have the answer for everything and that I'm responsible for everybody and everything and the success of everything and everyone's well-being. I need to take that pressure off of myself and realize I've got the right people in the right seats and I've got the right people around me and the right outside resources. This can actually be a lot easier and a lot more joyful. And so for 2023, that's my center, is getting right with myself and surrounding myself with the right people. And I'm really looking forward to what the year can bring.
Well, thank you for being candid and sharing that with me and with those who are listening or watching this, because everybody is going through that entrepreneurial roller coaster, and it's a wild ride sometimes, right? And just hang on for dear life and try to pull your strategy together for the next year. So I look forward to watching your continued evolution personally and as a company. I'll make sure to tune into your podcast as well. So if people need to reach you, what's the best way to find you? Is it LinkedIn or somewhere else?
Yeah, a couple places. You can find me on LinkedIn, Mary Grothe, Grothe. You can email me, info@houseofrevenue.com. You can connect with me on Instagram, Twitter. I'm all over. Just put my name in the Google search bar. You're going to find me. And the last really cool thing is Forbes is publishing 2 books for me. And The first one comes out in September 2023, and it's going to be that life story that I just gave some glimpses into, and just really the trials and challenges of surviving the dark side of success, which is what I had to do in my 20s, and then going into entrepreneurship and what has transpired with that. The second book is going to be April 2024, Revenue Scaling Playbook. So be on the lookout for those. If it's something that you're excited about reading in the future, we'll soon have a sign-up page. You could go to marygrothe.com right now and just drop your email in there. And then once we have that sign-up page for the pre-sale, I'll get you on the list. But anywho, that could be another really fun way to connect.
Great. Thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Kevin Lee's Power Marketing is available on all your favorite podcast networks. Kevin loves helping businesses excel at marketing. Having marketing challenges? Just like Santa in The Miracle on 34th Street, if Kevin can't help you, he'll know someone who can. Find him on LinkedIn, subscribe, or follow.